What was the decision-making process in your head to leave a partner position at McKinsey and go start your own venture?
You don't have those young engineers who are hungry to do interesting things on the product side. These days, it seems like being profitable is in fashion again. It was unfortunately not possible at that time inside McKinsey. We are doing about $10 million in annualized revenue. The company is actually profitable.
That's great.
We don't believe in being, being right. We believe in finding what is right for the company to do. You unfortunately cannot do that here. You'll be surprised at the pace at which people are doing things on their phone.
Really impressive.
If you think you know everything, good luck.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the AI Best Business Show, the show where you'll best learn about business, entrepreneurship, and tech and startups. Today with me, I have a special guest, Sanjeev. I'll let Sanjeev introduce herself, which I always like to do. Let my guests introduce themselves. That's because they do that better than me. Sanjeev, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Delighted to be here and looking forward to the interaction. Let me quickly introduce myself. I am an entrepreneur by heart, an engineer by background, and a management consultant in terms of the most of my professional life. But yeah, I try to bring now the entrepreneurial spirit, the business training I've had over the years, as well as some of my educational background to try and put together digital ventures in the Middle East.
Okay. Here's kind of a quick question. When was your first time you made money? Like, what was your first entrepreneurial story that you remember back in your childhood? I've heard some guests, they speak about selling stuff at school and making money and feeling entrepreneurial at this time. What was your moment where you're like, that's great?
This goes back a few decades. I used to sometimes, go help my dad out at his business. He had a small machine shop. He used to make mechanical dies. So he was in the manufacturing business of mechanical dies. I used to help him out. And then, at some point, I learned a few tricks of the trade. And one day dad wasn't around and I entertained some customers myself. It was pretty interesting and satisfying day. I did get a bit of coaching afterwards from dad because I priced things too low. But my journey started when I was probably about 13 or 14 years old. Now, this may get a bit sketchy in terms of labor laws, etc. Nobody forced me to be there. I was just out, there on my free will, and made a couple of bucks. And then afterwards, I did actually reasonably well working side by side, during my holidays, etc. Yeah, okay. That did give me a bit of an early start.
Going from that person to then having a career at McKinsey and Company, which is huge. Can you take us on a storyline of how you got to McKinsey? What was the path from to get to McKinsey, and then McKinsey, you left that and started a new journey. So just a quick storyline of how your career path up until today.
Sure. As I said, I am an entrepreneur at heart and an engineer by training, educational training. So, I was always, I guess, keen to explore opportunities to build something, which is, I guess, the engineer in me. But I also discovered over a period of time that I was probably actually a better problem solver or a debugger than actually a creator. I'm an okay creator. I'm not a great creator, but I think my strength lies elsewhere, which is in actually identifying issues and breaking them down to manageable pieces and then solve them. So as I was going through my engineering education, at some point I was in your neck of the woods at Berkeley, and I was in the PhD program. I realized that I would love to go solve real world problems a bit earlier than what my program would allow me to do so. So when I completed my master's, I looked around, and a lot of interesting stuff was happening. I got pulled into consulting at that point. I was very enamored by the type of work that it entails, the lifestyle that comes with it, and the growth opportunities that come with it. So yeah, I applied to the likes of Google's and a bunch of semiconductor companies in the Bay Area, and as well as some of the consulting firms. Eventually joined McKinsey because I thought, it'd be an interesting place to grow and develop. Now, in hindsight, Google might have been a better economic option because at that point it was still pre-IPO. But yeah, you live and learn, and I can't complain. Anything that I say at this point would be first world problems.
Okay. Um, he's kind of. I'm going on a tangent. When you were comparing between McKinsey and Google at this time, what was the factor that made you join McKinsey and not Google?
Um, so I thought about it long and hard at that point. With the limited context I had, I can try to sound zen, but this was 20 years ago, and I, didn't even have a few percentage of the experience that I have today. But at that point, it just felt like, there were better techies, better engineers out there, and I was not in the same league. So,
Okay.
instead of playing in a territory where you would be an average and okay person, why not play in a territory which feels a bit more comfortable? And the whole problem-solving aspect of the management consulting was something that really excited me. As I said, at the heart, I'm better at identifying problems and solving them. I'm not the best creator. So I chose to be, a problem solver as opposed to a creator at Google.
You joined McKinsey. Anyone that's listening to this podcast, young entrepreneur in his journey, is looking at McKinsey and like, this is somewhere I want to work at because of the brand name, because of the experience you get. How was it at McKinsey? Like from the inside, what can you tell us? What is the culture like? What is the work like? It just give us a summary of your path or your career over there.
Sure. Well, I think the top line is an amazing institution. It's just an incredible place that keeps churning out, incredible, managerial talent, and no points for guessing. You will find the alums of McKinsey pretty much every single one of Fortune 500 companies, and many tech startups as well. And the reason behind that, I think, is the organization is phenomenal in terms of identifying talent, and even more phenomenal in terms of grooming and coaching that talent and shaping them into someone who could actually, be a seasoned, mature business leader. It's a very intense culture. It's almost, I guess calling it a cult is a bad way of saying it, but it's a very um, intense and unique culture. You work long hours, you work intensely in teams, you don't take no for an answers, you basically keep going at it. You have to find a solution. The orientation needs to be basically of figuring out, a solution that is 80% good enough and is pragmatic to be implemented versus trying to find the academic answer. Your incentives and interests are completely aligned to the client. So at all times, you're trying to really do the right things for your client. And in that sense, it's a very strong culture that McKinsey has. And I'm sure some of the other consulting firms that are competitors are the same, right? Because you won't be there in the top leagues if you don't have that kind of culture. But management consulting overall, I think it's a great place to start your career because it helps you become a much better professional, much more well-rounded professional than perhaps if you would go to a different, organization, because the pace of, or the nature of work and the types of problems we solve are just very different.
Yeah. You become a partner there and then you leave to start Glow Ventures. Why was that? And how did the transition happen? And what was the decision-making process in your head to leave a partner position at McKinsey and go start your own venture?
I was, first of all, quite fortunate to become a partner there. Unlike what most people who have an insight into the professional services world might like to think, many people who do not become partners are probably even better professionals. There is a lot of I would say uh, emphasis on your own credentials and your own qualities, but in real life, it just helps also to get lucky at times, right? So if you have the momentum behind you, you may do well, and some of the others, who may be equally capable and talented may not do that well. So just becoming a partner to me is not necessarily a great deal. A lot of people who do not become partners are equally and probably even better professionals. So with that out of the way, let me answer your question. I became a partner, from analyst to partner in about 7 years or so, reasonably quick. And then I stayed on for another, 5 years or so, serving clients all over emerging markets. And this was about 2015, 2016 timeframe. A whole bunch of my colleagues who had left McKinsey, as well as a whole bunch of my friends from Bay Area and also from India, started to do incredible things in the tech space. And here I was thinking, it would be amazing to build some of these cool businesses. And it was unfortunately not possible at that time inside McKinsey to do those things. It is a bit easier now, from what I understand. There is also a clear sort of focus and emphasis towards business building on the digital side now inside the professional services firm. But these firms are large organizations that take time to move. It's not possible for them to change their business model overnight. So for me, in the thought process was, shall I continue doing more of what I've been doing, or shall I get on this tech train? So I chose the latter. Time will tell whether it was a great decision or not, but I'm very happy and very satisfied in terms of what I'm doing.
Okay. You've mentioned something I want to get back to, is the big organizations have a harder time to shift their, for example, adopting tech or building tech inside takes a little bit of time to shift to that. Why is that the case? Why are big organizations harder to shift or harder to focus on one goal or the other?
Well, it's almost a situation that exists by design, right? The organizations that have become this big and successful have become this big and successful because they have followed a particular mantra. They have done something really, really well. So I would look at it in a bit more positive way, that there are companies that have done well and have reached a certain scale and size, and then they still are open to change and are able to improvise. But just because there is a sheer strength of numbers there, it's not pragmatic to change direction all of a sudden, change your business model all of a sudden. So the hallmark of a good organization or a great organization to me is that keeps doing what it is doing well, while always keeping an eye out on what is happening in the world that could disrupt it, and adopting those things in a limited manner, doing the experimentation at all times. And then those experiments that succeed, you try to scale them faster. But yeah, it's very different from a startup. In a startup, you try to do something, 3 months later you realize that path that you were following is not going to pan out, and you're able to course correct rather quickly. And because the size of the organization is small, decision making is easier. Few people have to take those decisions. It's much easier to sort of even pivot 180 degrees if you have to. But in a large organization that has track record of success, doing what they've been doing very well for decades, it's just theoretically impossible for them to do that, and they shouldn't do that, in my view.
This is what I wanted to ask this, because a lot of entrepreneurs, for example, I'm a founder, I want to start Instagram. A lot of entrepreneurs be like, oh, Facebook is gonna do Instagram. They have pictures, they're big enough to do it. But what they don't realize is the big organizations sometimes see an idea but don't go after it because how big the organization is. So it's your opportunity as an entrepreneur to build that team, to build that startup, and then get acquired maybe in the future by this big organizations, because you've solved a problem they want to solve, but don't have the time, or they don't want to do the shift in their organizations to do it. So as an entrepreneur, always do risk, even if sometimes in your head you're going to be like, oh, Google could do this in a day, or Facebook or Instagram or whoever could do this in a day. You could do so I'm going to do it. No, go ahead and do it, because it might end up being a good startup to build. What is Glow Ventures?
So it's Glowfish Ventures, by the way.
Sorry, Glowfish Ventures. I'm very sorry.
It's okay. This is not the first time someone has struggled. I've heard Glowfish Ventures and Goldfish Ventures. So Glow Ventures, you at least got half of it, right? So what is Glowfish? We are a venture builder. We're based out of Dubai, which is home for me for the last decade and a half. And what we try to do is basically, not just back promising, interesting ideas that come across our doorsteps, but we actually do more than putting money behind them. We act as institutional co-founders for the selected ventures that we like, and we would like to build those companies side by side with very promising founders. We realize that in Middle East, it's a very different market compared to the US or China or India. First of all, it's a smaller market, so exits, etc., are not that straightforward. They're not always very clear in terms of how you're going to get there. And then scale matters, right? Because these are small markets, total 50 million or so people are here. And then also it's a bit of a bimodal market. It's not exactly a Gaussian market, if you know what I mean. So there are a lot of, blue collar employees here, workers here in the Middle East who have a very different kind of needs. And then there are, the upper middle class and the likes of the local population that have much higher GDP per capita if you were to divide the market into two markets. So, if you just then focus on the top part of the market, it is probably 20, 25 million people in the Middle East. So it's not a very large market versus the US that has 300 million plus folks, who would be comparable. So in a market like this, as I said, exits are not easy, and therefore it's also not that easy to have a deal flow and pipeline of promising ideas that you can deploy meaningful money behind, which is why traditionally VC firms here have struggled. Okay. They've not struggled in terms of not making ROI, but they have struggled in terms of raising very large funds as well, because it's not that straightforward to deploy the money here. Simply because a smaller market, fewer opportunities that are good that you would like to put money behind would be around. So we thought, instead of trying to follow the VC model, let's just also bring our business skills to the forefront and build these ventures ourselves along with the promising founders. So sometimes the ideas actually are our own, and we have a product factory. We get started on building the product and try to recruit like-minded co-founders to help us run operations. But the gist of our operating model is we basically act as institutional co-founder. A senior person seconds themselves to act literally as a co-founder, takes up a line role and takes up most of the stuff that can be done centrally. So we do tech and marketing, content and all that kind of stuff, and build a team in about 12 to 18 months so that we can step ourselves outside of the venture and then protect our interests as shareholders sitting on the board. But yeah, we put a couple of $1 million behind each of our ventures. And again, we pull the plugs also fast if we realize that something is not going to work out. Then we try not to throw good money after bad.
Right. And you've raised money for your ventures today, or is it you and your partners?
No, we have a fund domiciled in Cayman Islands for our venture studio, and also our ventures have been quite successful in raising Series A and B. Hopefully, one of the ventures will be at Series C stage soon as well. We've probably raised over $50 million so far.
Okay, what is in the venture builder kind of model? What are you aiming for? Is it growth or profitability? Because in a venture, VCs look for growth most of the time. They're funding the startups to make them grow as fast and as quick as possible. In the venture builder case, is that different?
Well, it shouldn't necessarily be different, but given we have larger equity stakes in the business, we do not feel a similar pressure to drive up the growth at any cost. Okay. That you would, if you have only 15-20% stake in a business, you would want to see significant growth. Otherwise, your return on investment might not be as stellar as it could be. We have typically 2 to 3x stake in ventures, so we do not need to have a similar, growth trajectory to be able to deliver decent returns, on our investment. So we are a bit conservative in that regard. I will not shy about it. We would love to focus on unit economics from day one to understand it. Of course, if it's a B2C business that requires certain scale, you would have to spend a bit of money and invest to get to the point where you can start to see profitability hopes. But the unit economics need to be somewhat clear. That's our sort of slightly conservative approach to investing. But we do love to see our portfolio ventures grow, but it's not growth at any cost. I guess that's probably the difference. We would not like to, we have a methodology or mindset of eliminating risk as much as possible. And with that mindset, we don't like to lose capital. So, we would not want to crash and burn, even if a venture requires a slower growth and that gives us the higher chances of, survival, we are happy with it.
Okay. When I'm a founder, I'm coming and applying to Glowfish Ventures. What are what are the criteria you have in place in selecting the startups or the founders or the co-founders you're working with? What's your criteria? Do you have a paper of criteria? How are you selecting these founders and these startups and these ideas?
Well, it's not as complicated as you may imagine, right? At the top of it, you have to look at the idea and say, is it a big enough idea? Do you see an opportunity to make something big here? Then you have to look at, is there who else is doing something similar, right? What's the competitive intensity like? If it's a space that's already taken by well-funded companies, then might not be the best place to invest, even though it looks promising. So, it's a big enough idea, not too crowded, and the founding team or the founders are the right kind of folks that we would like to partner with, then yes, let's go for it.
Okay. Do you have any examples, or can you share examples of startups that came to you that was exciting, part of your portfolio, that you the story of how you made the decision of investing or coexisting this venture?
Sure. So one of the latest ventures that we've been building is called MobiMatter. Okay. It's a digital telco venture, with the aspiration to become a digital distributor at some point. So have both B2B2C as well as B2C plays. So it's also a retailer. Right now, you can buy eSIMs for all your travel needs all over the world. We are selling in about 200 countries right now. Wow. When we first started discussing this possible venture with a founder who actually we knew for over a decade, it's a close friend, used to work at a telco. And this wasn't the idea that he came up with when we first started talking, but over a period of time, once we had those discussions and we sort of stress tested the ideas, etc., eventually we arrived at something which is what you see now at MobiMatter. So we basically looked at the opportunity. There are very few companies around the world in that space. The investment thesis was very clear. Every single industry is going digital. Why would telco sales not go digital, right? Why would you still keep going to the store to buy your telecom connections, or if you're in emerging markets, your recharges or prepaid SIMs? So we said, the industry seems pretty big, wasn't very competitive, and it's global by nature. And the founder is a very interesting, very skillful, very capable individual. So we said, yes, let's do it. And fast forward 2.5 years now, we are doing about $10 million in annualized revenue. The company is actually profitable, 10% or so net profitable. Wow. So yeah, very happy with it.
I like these stories. I'm a person that likes profitability on day one, if I could achieve that. And so I like to hear these stories. You interact with a lot of founders and a lot of startups. You're in the weeds sometimes. What are interesting stories or unexpected lessons you've learned from founders you work with? Like most of the time, founders kind of depend on you to give them lessons. But what are moments where you learned lessons from these founders or these startups?
Well, it's actually much more of a two-way street than what you're describing. We by no means, have learned everything. We are learning every day. So it's hard to say there's one or two examples. In every single venture, we have learned probably equally from the founders, in terms of what they've learned from us. And it's a team effort, right? Walking into something which is an unknown territory, requires you to have a vision, requires you to have a point of view, a hypothesis, but it keeps getting challenged on a daily basis, right? And we don't believe in being, being right. We believe in finding what is right for the company to do, and often that comes, and the thinking is shaped by the founders. So hard for me to pick one example because there's so many. We learn in every single venture almost on a daily basis.
So, and the reason I ask this is you're a board member, investor, you're part of this decision-making process. And I wanted to understand more of what is the decision-making process. And from what I got out of you, it's more of a talk and discuss and shape and the founder shapes the thinking around the idea more than you coming in and like dictating how do stuff go.
No, absolutely. Dictating how should stuff go is definitely, in my view, a short recipe for failure, right? You do need to have an alignment in terms of where the company needs to go, what kind of product do you need to build, how are you going to go approach the market? All those are fair questions. All those are, important questions to ask on day one and have, some sense of direction for each of those. And sometimes it's very, okay and being honest, by saying, actually, we don't know. We don't have a clue how this will pan out. Because some of the things that we are trying to do, including the movie matter example I gave, right? Some of the things we have done there, nobody has ever done anywhere in the world. So we don't know how the market will react. We don't know how, or didn't know how things will pan out. In that case, you basically say, okay, we're going to go with our gut feel, and none of us is very sure about it. And if it doesn't work, we're going to course correct, but we're going to learn. So one of the things that we definitely emphasize is, is on doing a bit of thinking upfront, but also not, falling in the analysis paralysis kind of frame of mind. When you are not sure, do you launch? You basically go to market and you learn from the feedback you get from the market and you improvise. No point in just thinking and debating. But yeah, everybody on the table, has a voice, has an opinion, and you have to be open-minded and listen to what ideas are coming your way. Because if you think you know everything, good luck.
Okay. You're looking at your portfolio, you've invested in different sectors, digital health, automotive, telecommunications. What are the common challenges you see across startups in the MENA region compared to what you used to see in Silicon Valley?
That's an interesting, space for us to explore. What we have found, or at least what I have found, in the MENA region, is that there is a lot of entrepreneurial talent, and that's true all over the world, right? Wherever there is an economy, wherever there are people, they're bound to be smart, driven entrepreneurial individuals. So you have plenty of those individuals who have the hunger and the passion and exciting set of ideas here in the MENA region as well. And maybe I should focus more on the GCC, because MENA is slightly different than GCC.
Right.
So one of the things that we've noticed is there is actually a dearth of tech talent. If you look at a lot of these successful names that are on our lips, in the Valley or in India or China, or Europe, most of those were started by a founder or one of the co-founders of the starting team had very deep tech experience or tech background or product person, right? So a lot of these startups are product led in the rest of the world. In MENA region, unfortunately, there isn't that much tech talent. So it's kind of unique that there are a lot of entrepreneurs, but there is, lack of tech talent or founders who are product people. And that's essentially the white space we identified. And that's why we play that role and act as an institutional co-founder who takes over that responsibility. So yeah, I think that's a unique thing that exists in most of the MENA region. GCC for sure, but now Egypt is becoming a very interesting hotbed of talent, and there are a lot of product, led founders coming out of Egypt. So I hope that gap does get bridged here soon.
What is you mentioned Egypt? You mentioned that gap in tech talent. How can the GCC overcome this? Is it by education? Is it by choice of people's education, or the people most of the time they want to be the founder that does the business meeting or sales? They want to go into tech. How can you change this mindset or do a shift there?
So first of all, I don't think it's a mindset issue. I think it's just a capability issue. If you, for lack of a better metric, if you look at top technical universities, I don't think there is one in GCC.
Right.
You don't have the equivalents of Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, Georgia Tech, Caltech, etc., the likes of those here. And as a result, you don't have those young engineers who are hungry to do interesting things on the product side. Egypt has incredible tech universities, so you do have an army of tech talent coming out. India has the same. Pakistan has quite a bit as well. China definitely as well. So all of these places, in addition to Silicon Valley, where there are good technical universities churning out engineers, tech talent, by definition are going to have a healthy mix of startups and ideas and products that will come out of there. GCC just does not have it. So how do we now get to that point? I think aspiring to have top technical universities here is definitely a fair aspiration. Pragmatically speaking, it's a challenge that probably can be met in more than 10 to 15 years. So it'll take at least a decade or two to get there. So if you then were to say, okay, how do you bridge that gap over the next few years? I think the companies here, the entrepreneurs here, have to find an interesting way to partner
Bring the
with
talent in.
some of the other partner with some of the other places to bridge that gap. And the answer isn't just import the talent here, because these are expensive markets here. So you have to find, almost in all cases, as a working arrangement whereby your tech team is near the source of tech talent, as opposed to just trying to import them here.
I think, and that's a theory I have. What we lack in the MENA region, or in GCC, we're fragmented. We're still fragmented. If we look at the US is a huge population where talent in different states is still considered part of the US. While in GCC and MENA region, we see KSA as itself, UAE as itself. But what would happen if we integrate all these markets together, bringing Egypt with the talent and a huge population and labor they have, with the institutional funding from the GCC region, with Lebanon and different other countries coming in together, joining this tech talent with institutional funding could bridge us and have a better outcome for the whole region.
No, absolutely. I think that's a dream, right? Now, pragmatically, if you were to think about how do you make it happen, you have to think about, okay, what kind of companies are going to come out of this, right? So you can have SaaS plays that are by definition more universal, or you could have applied tech plays, deep tech plays as well, which are by definition universal, right? So for all the SaaS and deep tech type stuff, it has to be talent meets funding, right?
Okay.
Kind of play. So what you described makes a ton of sense. For the applied tech type of things, such as, let's say, Uber kind of plays, right? It's a little bit more challenging because the reason you just alluded to, which is these are multiple countries. We talk about this geography as sort of homogeneous geography. It's not United States that have 300 million people, where you don't have to worry about regulation in each state. You don't have to set up, you set up a Delaware company and you can operate all over the US, right? You unfortunately cannot do that here, because these are different countries. Now, if an American company has to operate in Canada, it has to open a Canadian subsidiary. It has to basically comply with Canadian laws, etc. So, the same applies here. Now, if you were to say, I have to go and do this in all of these countries that are anywhere between, 2 million population to 20 million population, you do have quite a bit of admin and quite a bit of overheads and costs associated with it. So it's not that straightforward to just replicate the applied tech place. It's operationally more complex. It's also costly. But definitely for deep tech and SaaS type plays, I think we're going to see some winners that will come out eventually from this region, and as soon as we can unlock or sort of create that marriage of talent and funding.
You look at different startups, different sectors. From what you're seeing, what are the trends in the MENA region that you're seeing in different industries?
Well, these days it seems like being profitable is in fashion again. So people, whoever you talk to, are all quite focused about profitability, and some of the compromises on growth are actually being made in a very, very explicit manner. So I think that's the top trend. On our side, what we are trying to do now is build much more integrated plays, so digitally enabled plays, as opposed to just digital plays. Because as I said, the markets are smaller, and you need to be able to play in the entire value chain at times to be able to justify the investment you make in the tech. So there is an increased focus towards digitally enabled but vertically integrated plays, as opposed to marketplaces. So I think that's going to be the sort of flavor for the next few years to come.
How hard is that digital transformation in the MENA, like in the GCC and MENA region? Because most of these countries haven't really adopted fully digital transformation. What is the path to get there, and what are the challenges to grow that digital transformation?
So digital transformation, when you talk about it, just allow me to clarify. Are you talking about digital transformation within large corporates and governments, or are you talking about as a society perhaps adopting more digital tech and using digital companies to meet their day-to-day service and product needs?
On the consumer side.
The later side. Okay, yeah. It's a very interesting observation. If you were to look at the purchasing power versus the penetration of digital services and products at a consumer level, the region is definitely still, in the box where there's a lot of opportunity. Because you see some of the other markets with much less purchasing power having much more advanced digital services and products, and the penetration is quite high. And of course, the US and the Canada and the Western European world already is pretty heavily penetrated on the digital side, but there's also purchasing power. So yeah, MENA has a lot of potential. It's getting bridged quite fast. You'll be surprised at the pace at which people are doing things on their phone and looking for all types of products and services on the phone. But there is still room to go, which I guess is an exciting news for entrepreneurs, because that means there is opportunity. This gap will not stay this way. That's my hypothesis. And that's why we are in this space.
What industries are still untapped, like automotive, health? What industries are still untapped that you would like, man, I wish a founder could come to me with this idea that we could go and build?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, we would already be building it. Having said that, I do think there is a lot more that can be done on the healthcare side. It can be heavily digitized. And the reason that it has not reached the level of digitization that some of the OECD countries have is not because of lack of availability of tech or lack of availability of entrepreneurs. These industries, especially healthcare, tend to be heavily regulated. So the regulation also or changes in regulation sort of dictate the pace at which the digital transformation within the industry can happen. It's happening and it's accelerating. So, we're quite excited about that. And that's the reason 2 of our next plays are actually in the healthcare space. I also think automotive is still quite virgin in terms of digital products and services. There is a lot of emphasis and a lot of players on helping consumers and businesses buy and sell cars and discover different models, etc. But there is a lot of stuff that can still be done in the entire automotive servicing space, spare parts, and all this kind of stuff. And we're seeing some players emerge, but it's far from it. There are other large verticals such as oil and gas, where there's a lot more digitization that could happen. Even telco, there's a lot of digitization, we think we can happen. So, I think there are sizable chunks of opportunity that still exist.
What really interests me is Egypt. I think Egypt has done a great job in terms of digitizing their telco services, in terms of how payments happen, in terms of the services they provide. I think looking at Egypt, and I think the GDP per person is a little bit lower than the GCC region, but the lead they've taken on this end is really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not just Egypt, right? You look at China, the right. GDP per capita for China is a fraction of what it is in GCC, right? Here, at the top level, you will look at it and say it's about $25,000 GDP per capita. But then when you, as I said, you separate the bimodal sort of distribution of population here, right? And you look at the target audience, you're talking about a healthy 25-30 million population with a GDP per capita of about 50,000. So it's China is a fraction, India is a fraction, even Pakistan and Bangladesh are, small fractions, and they are growing quite fast as well. So yeah, Egypt is definitely a phenomenal success story, and I'm very excited about the market for years to come. But Egypt is not alone. I think GCC lags behind many similar markets, and it's not going to lag behind forever. That's our hypothesis, and that's why we are trying to make the plays we are trying to make.
Yep. Speaking about China, and they've had WeChat and the idea of paying online. Like, I remember watching a documentary back in 2016, and I've lived in the US since 2016. I'm like, wow, they're so much advanced from us. I mean, even in the US, most of people still pay with cash or credit cards. You don't see a lot of paying through your phone or like QR codes and stuff. I'm like, wow. We've recently seen Kareem and their partnership with Etisalat on this end. What do you think is the play out here? Are we able of creating a super app in the region where we take everything digital, or is it we are 5-10 years behind?
Well, we are 5-10 years behind if you were to look at where we are today versus where China is, right? Or where China was 5 years ago. But I am very excited and much more optimistic about this kind of gap getting bridged much faster than the period we just talked about. Deals such as Etisalat and Kareem, I think are only going to accelerate it, right? Etisalat is trying to build a super app. Kareem is trying to build a super app, and they're, them partnering with each other. I think this is only going to accelerate this. You need to have a wide enough, set of customers and the ability to actually capture the lifetime value to justify a super app. And players such as Kareem and Etisalat do have that. At least, they have all the right ingredients in front of them. So I would be very surprised if we don't have a winner come out soon on this front.
Let's say you drop Glowfish Ventures, you drop everything you're doing, and you're going to build a new startup. What would be that startup you're going to build?
So, funny enough, you asked this. We are actually some of the GPs have partnered, and we are acting as founders and building a startup as we speak right now.
Wow.
We are trying to build an interesting play in the animal care space in the Middle East.
Okay.
So yeah, I can't talk a lot about it, but I'm very excited personally, to be a founder. Earlier I used to be an founder on behalf of the institutional, so institutional co-founder to actually being a co-founder. But I guess all these set of experiences would hopefully help us avoid some of the missteps that one would typically make in these things.
And a lot of people don't realize how the growth in the pet care industry. But I've recently had a founder on that they buy different e-commerce companies, and he's told me the amount of e-commerce for pet stores and KSA especially has exploding in a huge way, and for many factors. Some of them maybe like family formation. People now have more pets, especially young people. It's grown just amazingly, and people don't realize that because I guess the culture and the mindset isn't really adapting it in our heads that fast, but it's really growing and explosively. So I think it's the right space to kind of build in this creation. If you had a billboard on Times Square that had your life mission on it, what would be that life mission? What would that billboard say?
Wow. Yeah, it's an interesting question. First of all, why would I need a billboard on Times Square to talk about my life? I'm nearly not that exciting and interesting person to do that. There are many others, who should be in front of me in the line to get that billboard. So I don't think I qualify to be there.
Our podcast secured the billboard. It's there and it has your name on it. It's all yours.
So you're gonna force me to embarrass myself by doing self-aggrandizement and then go on a billboard in Times Square. Okay. Wow.
It's more of like if you would have, let's say today I came in and you have $1 trillion fund or an unlimited amount of funds of money, and you dropped everything to go focus on building one, not building, but solving one world mission. What will be that one world mission you want to solve? What's a problem you wake up every morning and be like, I wish this would go away, or I wish this problem would get solved for the whole world?
There are so many of them, actually. I do worry about climate change, and it sounds like a cliche, right? But end of the day, I'm 40 plus, so I've probably lived more than half of my life. But the next generation that is just getting started, or the generation after that is getting started, they're going to have a tough time. So I wish somebody, if I'm able to, that'll be fantastic. But realistically, the odds are not in favor of me solving the problem. But somebody solves the climate change problem. To me, that's pretty big. Water is a real issue that most of the world doesn't even know about, doesn't even talk about. There's incredible levels of suffering that a large part of the world population endures on a daily basis to just get access to clean water. So I wish water and climate change are the two problems that get solved in our lifetimes, or at least we make significant progress on it. But yeah, I do realize that when I say that, I sound like anybody else who's watching news and is somewhat concerned about it. So yeah, if I can solve them, I'll be very happy, man. I know that realistically speaking, I have no chance of solving any of those.
I think both of these are very interesting problems. I myself believe that the next kind of trend of the next decade, we had the iPhone. Before that, we had the Industrial Revolution. Now we're having AI. But the real problem solver in the world would be taking that cost of energy to zero. And that would happen with us consuming less gas and going more to solar stuff, whether it's wind and whether it's the sun, which is the biggest fusion energy out there, that could help us solve a lot on the climate and environmental part. So I definitely agree with you. Climate is a huge industry that is really barely untapped. Sanjeev, I really
Again, it's a matter of survival, right? The planet will be fine. The planet will be there. I hate it when people say we are killing the planet. We are not killing the planet. We are killing ourselves.
yes,
Let's be
exactly.
clear. It's
Yeah.
our species that may get wiped out. The planet has seen far worse, and planet will survive. So I hope for our own sake we wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah. I think the planet is made in a way to recycle itself, as they call it. It find a way to come back to life again, but it's us humans that are getting affected every single day.
Right, bro.
Sanjeev, I really appreciate you coming on the pod. I've literally learned a lot from you in this short time, and I could go forever and ever, just keep on going, asking questions and getting more knowledge from you. Thank you for being here. Where could people follow more of what you're doing? How could founders, aspiring founders, apply and work with you? Any plugins you want to put in?
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's been a fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. In terms of aspiring founders, would love to get in touch. I'm easily searchable and very easy to find and message on LinkedIn. And you're always welcome to visit our website at glowfishventures.com and see what are the interesting things that we are busy with.
Thank you again for being here.
Terrific. Thank you. Cheers.